This should be interesting. There's a lot going on, you know. We want to talk some about what that thing in Iraq is about too, you know, because I don't know how the heck that's going to work out. You know, that's a big question. But the whole Middle East initiative, it's a touchy time, that's for sure. You know. I'm really glad you could get here. You know. And of course, Nita. You know. I'm going to let him see this book again. Sort of rushed here.
When was it published now?
92. 92.
Yeah, welcome very much to Conversations. We have two guests this morning going to be able to talk about events in the Middle East. And on my immediate right, we'll introduce first is a friend of Conversations, been a guest many times, and she is Nita Renfrew. And she is, among other things, she's a journalist, and she's also, among other things, the author of a book that we can let you see what it looks like. It's a biography, Saddam Hussein, that she wrote in 92?
It was published in 92.
92. And I can say parenthetically, perhaps not so, that it has been used by the intelligence agencies because it seems to be authentic in an area where there's a lot of potentiality for disinformation and so forth. And for that reason, it seems to be taken up by some of the intelligence agencies of the United States to get a sense of what the realities are. And on my on my left is Theo Dov Golan. He's been a guest in the past, and he's a medical doctor and immunologist, and he was at a period of time, I guess around 1968 or so, or 86, I think it was, that he was in the government in a post that would be comparable to the Surgeon General of the United States, a very highly responsible position. And Dov, you've been a guest in the past. Welcome to Conversations.
Thank you.
And welcome back to New York. You've been in Haifa for a long time.
Thank you very much.
What do you think? It's been about 6 months or so since we've talked, and things are developing. One of the things that we were just coming up to that incursion into Iraq. What do you sense, and can you share? You've just returned a couple days ago from Haifa, having been there for a long time. Can you share with us what your sense is, and then perhaps the sense generally as you picked it up in Israel, about the invasion of Iraq that took place, and then now particularly maybe the aftermath that we're talking about here on October 3rd of 2003?
Well, actually, you may think about 2 points with this regard. One has the Israeli perspective of it. Iraq is one of the states which never made peace with Israel.
How many of them that have not? They still have not?
They still have not.
Yeah, right, okay.
And although it has attacked, or was involved in attacking Israel in a couple of the wars in the past.
Yeah, they were involved in wars, yeah.
In 48, in 67, they sent in army, and were on their way to send in an army.
And it was Iraq that was attacked when they bombed the nuclear generating plant.
Yeah.
Right?
And since they always declared that Israel should be annihilated and removed from under the earth.
I'm sorry?
Since they always proclaimed that Israel should be removed from being a country, and always threatened the existence of Israel and supported all kind of factors in the Middle East which are against the state of Israel. Of course, one can remember what happened in 81 when the Air Force has destroyed the nuclear generator in Iran, near Baghdad. So this is one issue. So the removal of Saddam Hussein and his regime in the Middle East under such condition has lessened the potential of forces against Israel.
You think it has?
Oh, no, has lessened for sure.
I saw a piece in the New York, if I may, I saw a piece in the New York Times the other day that on a world scale, particularly in the Arab world, it was the United States initiative in terms of Iraq, and that never has the attitude toward the United States been lower, particularly not only in the world, but also in the general, but also particularly in the Arab and Muslim world. The animosity directed at the United States has never been more marked than it is right now as a result of that.
That's the other aspect. So the other aspect is about what was achieved by this intervention in Iraq by the United States and its coalition. I mean, one has to be very careful in analyzing the situation so close to the event. I remember that within the first week of the active war, the whole media was actually kind of showing that there is a big of misorganization and failure of the army, of the Americans, the British, to take whatever they thought would be. And within 3 weeks, actually, the whole thing was over.
Yeah, May 1st, he flew on the aircraft carrier and say the thing is over, but there's been a problem of...
So one has to realize that coming into an Arab state, which is actually one of the most intelligent population in the Middle East,
the
Iraqis, yeah.
Highly developed. They were about, weren't they, Nita?
They were
about to be made a developed nation
to be
before
declared
the
No
Gulf
question
War.
about that.
world,
There is
nation.
actually a rivalry between Egypt and Iraq, who has leadership among them.
Well, now it would be Egypt, huh?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll see.
All right.
So judging what happened in Iraq from that point of view, with regard to the resistance, with regard to the changes, it's too early to judge. And one should hold the horses, if I may say, for a longer period of time, let's say a year, and see what really is evolving within a year of the coalition trying to make an input on the situation in Iraq from that political point of view.
I see, yeah. But
So Israel is hopeful that a change might take place. And of course, we don't know more than that.
Maybe you people can set me straight, because you brought it up in terms of Iraq being...
Could I say something?
Yeah, oh, sure, go ahead, Nita. Go ahead, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I went to Israel in 1968 after the 67 war, and I was in my early 20s, and the people that... I lived on a kibbutz on Golan, which is right next to the Jordanian border,
Golan.
to south of the Golan, which bears you bear its name. And the generation that was my generation were the people who had just fought in the 67 war. My kibbutz was right on the border, and the Iraqis had gone past there in 67 on the way, I guess, to Jenin or something, you know, to that part of...
They tried to. They never reached there.
Never reached there.
Right.
And my friends on the kibbutz were in their early 20s, and they had fought in the war, and they would talk all the time about the war. And I had never really thought about Iraq in my life. But it came up in the conversation all the time in this context. They would say, well, the only soldiers that fought bravely were King Hussein's Bedouin Guard and the Iraqis. And they said the Iraqis didn't have any training, and they had terrible weapons, lousy weapons. But if they ever get any training and good weapons, they're going to be a threat to Israel. And it's a fact that Iraq is the only country, the only Arab country, that has both a sizable population, meaning a potential army, and oil, meaning the ability to turn it into a modern army. Unlike Egypt, which has a very large population but no oil, or the Gulf countries, that Saudi Arabia and so on, which have lots of oil but they don't have populations. So it became clear to me at the time that Iraq was slated for
Targeting.
It was targeted in the future for, to be destroyed because it was a potential enemy of Israel. And it's no surprise to find out that Wolfowitz, who is now our number 2 at the Pentagon, and who is in charge of the whole Iraq reconstruction, and he was in charge of the attack and so on, has been, according to the New York Times Magazine, lobbying for a destruction
decades
since 1971 in the various think tanks and so on that he worked in, and his colleagues, people like Richard Pearl and all these people. So I remember at that time, when I came back, when Iraq began to be in the news, I thought, this poor country is going to... But I always thought that Iraq was a very... must be a really awful country in the sense that people had awful lives there and so on, because what I would read about in the newspapers was about the dictatorship and the this and the that and the this. I went there in '84 for the first time as a journalist, in '85, early '85, right after we reestablished relations in '84. And what I found was totally different from anything I had read. I found a modern country full of vitality, the most intelligent people, no discrimination against women. I mean, it was the most, and it was in the middle of the Iran-Iraq war. And I remember thinking, you know, because this country has become this modern country and so on, it's doomed to be destroyed by, you know, by the Friends of Israel. Because I remembered so clearly what I had heard, the conversations all the time in 1968 and 69 when I was in Israel. And I also saw, for instance, because women in Iraq have traditionally been emancipated, and I saw that, you know, 50% of the students were women at university level, all the way up to the middle levels in government. Women comprised, you know, 50% of the positions. They all kinds of things. They didn't wear the veil. They were all literate, even in the small villages, thanks to Saddam Hussein's campaign for literacy. And of course, that made it evident that the countries like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Iran, which is not an Arab country but which is an Islamic country, would want this regime destroyed because it represented the liberation of women. And in fact, I know that a lot of women in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait were pointing to Iraq and saying, why can't we have that kind of rights? So Iraq was
modernizing?
It had modernized. It was literate.
It was about to be made a developed country.
The United Nations had been going to declare it a first world nation at the time that the Iran-Iraq war broke out. And then even after the war, which had drained a lot of its resources, in 1989-90, the United Nations stated that it was on a par with Portugal, which is a European country. So I think it's clear that the war on Iraq by the United States came out of the sentiment of Israel that Iraq was a danger.
Well, Israel is we have a special relationship with Israel. We have a special relationship. You want to relate to that?
Well, I think that I don't want to say that we were against the war of Iraq, but I don't think that the Iraq war was a result of what Israel thinks or is afraid of. I think that what they have done, it was a big mistake going into Kuwait and trying to kind of cause instability in the Gulf area in the 91 situation. And I think that the United States, as the only superpower now in the world, felt very uncomfortable with a regime which could be potentially causing instability. And coming back to the story of the Twin Towers, which was the first attack against this major superpower in its homeland, and thereafter the anthrax scare, and I still believe that the anthrax originated somehow in Iraq.
Interesting.
Not directly, but indirectly. I mean, I don't think that Saddam Hussein's people directly gave it to some of the...
Whoever did that.
Whoever
we don't
did
even
it.
know who
Yeah, but so far nobody found out.
States.
And it
could
was
have
a
been
highly
domestic.
weaponized anthrax, I mean, with regard to its size, with regards to its being siliconized and being made available to be blown into the air and not settle down in that specific timetable. And so this is a cause of instability. Now, we were kept and were asked to keep quiet during the whole war, as you remember.
Even Israel was, right.
And we were forced...
You're talking about the war, this recent one. The recent
and
one.
we were forced to accept again the condition of non-retaliation. And as a result, if you are aware, they sent in again Patriots.
Missiles,
the whole setup of Patriots from Germany, from the States. and already had by that time, we have done a lot of research with regard to the Arrow, anti-ballistic missile, and this became operational as well. So we were in a defensive position. And
vis-a-vis that
vis-a-vis the situation, and we were told that we should not intervene unless being attacked, and even if being attacked, the Americans are going to take care of it.
I wonder if I could cue
so
off.
Just let me only finish.
Sure, by all means.
So Israel went through a very difficult time. If you remember, everybody was going again with a mask.
Yeah, mask. Everything.
I think it was a little bit overdone, but it was a necessity which the defense department thought is necessary to take care of.
Yeah. I wonder if I could cue off what you said, a couple things, and just say, I remember back in 1991, when the war came, George Herbert Walker Bush, our 41st president, was able to gain a large coalition of people, including even Syria and great numbers of others, many of whom paid for the effort.
Of course.
Egypt and all this. And it was to defend Kuwait against the fact that Kuwait had been invaded by an outside power.
An Arab state, even.
An Arab state, but they'd been invaded. And, but I understand we live in a world of geopolitical reality and that sort of thing, but the United States just now invaded Iraq. All right? Now, I guess there's a distinction between Iraq invading Kuwait and the world getting exercised that a nation was invading another nation. But what about the fact that we, as a nation, invaded another nation, and now we find no weapons of mass destruction, we find none of these kind of things, and I see in the press the approval of the incursion into Iraq is at an all-time bottom now. The president is really plummeting in terms of that because they find no weapons or anything, things like that. And then secondly, I wonder, you said earlier, you said America now, the United States. I'd like to bring it in and think of the United States. The United States is a hyperpower. It's a French term, but they're a superpower beyond anything Rome ever was or anything of that sort of thing. But the New York Times famously said at the time of the incursion into Iraq was being considered by Wolfowitz in the United States and George Bush unilaterally against the United Nations and that sort of thing, that the United States is one power. And the other power, the other superpower in the world, they said, is world public opinion. Now, world public opinion has turned radically against the United States since that invasion. And is it beyond the realm of possibility to think that world public opinion, the world public opinion, could actually get to a situation where they would challenge the unquestioned superpower status of the United States? Or is the United States totally invulnerable and can do whatever it wants with its allies that go along with it and can never be challenged like Rome couldn't be challenged in the days of, you know, when they had superpower
if you ask
status?
Me, I will answer that it's a moral question, of course.
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
And the moral question, as a Jew, I can only compare it to some extent with the time of the 38 Munich situation, where Chamberlain and Daladier, I think, was then the premier. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Well, I remember Chamberlain, of course.
Yeah.
Went to Munich and signed an agreement and tried to prevent war after the threat of Hitler then to do whatever he was going to do to the Czechs and let them take a piece of Czechoslovakia then, which didn't satisfy him, and I think.
Now, are you comparing that to? Are you comparing that to Iraq, or are you comparing that to the United States?
No, I'm comparing that to Saddam Hussein.
To Saddam Hussein, yes, compared to Hitler, not the United States compared to.
No.
I think a lot of the world is comparing the United States to Hitler. That's the point I was trying to make.
I said again, as a Jew, this is my lesson of history. That you. I don't know if I'm right in my...
No, I don't either.
I don't know if I'm right to make the comparison. No. But what I feel is that for sure Saddam Hussein has proven to be a very evil person. He has done a lot of damage to his own people. He has done a lot of damage to his own neighbors. And I want to go into the reason why. I mean, I add even that he was supported by the United States to go against Iran.
They definitely were, because they were worried about fundamentalist Islam.
Okay, but I'm not going into that. He has proven to be, he was even named the butcher of Baghdad.
By whom?
By many
people. By American propaganda sources?
No,
by who?
In the Arab world.
Okay.
he did so. I mean, you can find now the mass graves all over Iraq.
With all due respect, if I may, in a historical sense, we find mass graves scattered all over Southeast Asia and Vietnam, where we, the United States of America, killed something like 5 million people. So what I'm trying to say is it's not a
No, I agree. I'm bringing the point of view about...
Because we were trying to compare Hitler to the United States.
Okay.
Or if that is a possibility, because we just accept the United States position as somehow legitimate of some order, and the World Bank and the International Monetary
Fund. As an Israeli, as a Jew, this
Mm.
is my comparison.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to say something.
Well, wait, let him make his point. Yeah.
Okay.
And as a result of that, one has to put a question, which is, how long do I sit and wait? How long do I go ahead and appease? How long do I try to influence by diplomatic ways the situation? And when do I come to the conclusion that I have to do what I call a preemptive thing?
I see. And then it was also,
this is it.
Yeah, and then and the attack on the atomic generating plant was preemptive. And most people in the West will applaud that. I'm not sure that's the case with the world. But anyway, what did you want to say?
Well, I wanted to bring it back to when I was in Israel in '68, and the talk was about the Iraqis as a potential enemy. And the reason for that, obviously, is because of the Palestinian question, because the Iraqis were on the border, the Arab-Israeli war, that particular one, and all of them have been fought over the Palestinian question. Saddam Hussein, as a Ba'ath Party member, as a prominent Ba'athi, was not in power at that time, but the Ba'athis basically have always supported the return of the Palestinians to their land, and that was the reason that the Israelis felt that that Iraq would be a danger because of the support for the Palestinians, not because of any other reason. So, we get to the Palestinian question. Without the Palestinian question, there wouldn't be all of this instability in the Middle East, probably.
That seems to be the case. Yeah.
So, it's like we can't really talk about Iraq as a danger or anything unless we deal with the whole premise of Israel and the whole Palestinian question, how Israel came to be, whether there were or there were not people there. I know you and I disagree about that. When I went to Israel, I went there, having heard the slogan, a land without a people for a people without a land, and I found that this was not true. And I went there thinking, I went there thinking I was going to this land that was going to be a light unto all nations, and I landed in this kibbutz, and I was working in the fields. I was working in the banana plantation.
They have bananas in Israel? They have bananas?
Yeah, they export bananas.
I didn't know they had
And
bananas.
this was one of the largest banana
I know they had
exporting
oranges.
kibbutz.
Well, the bananas
So I was,
they have melons too.
Melons. I bet melons. Good, big
I
melons.
was out in the fields a few days after I had arrived, and, the skies were blue, and we were right near the border. So on the other side there was a hill, and there was a Jordanian village there. And I watched this Mirage jet fly over, and of course the Mirage jets at the time were these big hero things that the Israelis were proud of because of their performance in the '67 war. And everybody started clapping when this Mirage jet flew over. And pretty soon I saw this mushroom cloud over this Jordanian village. And I said, "What is that?" And they said, "Oh, don't worry, that's just napalm."
Napalm?
Napalm. And I said, "Napalm?" And they said, "Yes, And I said, "Well, but napalm, that's a village." And the answer was, "Look, we have to do it to these Arabs because we have to teach them a lesson." And I was there 9 months, and I watched a Mirage fly over once a week and drop napalm on a village.
Without any reason?
Without any reason. I have to say that...
on.
No, yes. At night
And I don't think it was napalm. Because we never used napalm.
That's what I was.
Yeah,
that's what.
That's one of the problems. You got to get the facts straight and everything, but it's also
But what
within
else was it?
the larger context.
Meaning it had an actual mushroom. And
Well, a mushroom is a mushroom.
Yeah, mushroom is a.
but you know, but
Let me answer.
There was a lot of no. You said at nighttime there was a lot of firing and so on.
Why was the firing at night time?
Pardon?
What was going
Well,
on?
but what I want to say is this was in the
No,
daytime.
what was going on at night time?
What was going on?
Yeah, you tell me.
Well, you know,
They tried to infiltrate into the kibbutzim and kill on the Jordanian border.
well, let me talk about that.
Go ahead.
I was the third week I was there
I was then the commanding officer of the medical corps in the northern front.
in the northern.
He was there a lot
yes.
longer.
And the third week I was there, they sent, because I was part of an American group of volunteers, and they sent 8 of us down to the border, to the banana fields. We were putting paper bags on the bananas. It was October, so that they would not freeze before they cut them. And they sent us down right next to the border, and always somebody from the kibbutz stayed with us. This day, nobody from the kibbutz stayed with us, and the supervisor, his name was Avishai, remember, he said, look, if the Palestinians start shooting at you, there's a trench over there, so you go and hide until the army gets here. And, you know, we didn't have any military training, and I thought, what a strange thing to say. So they took us down there at 4 in the morning. I was working, putting these paper bags on the bananas. We were working in pairs. And all of a sudden, you know, there was this tremendous explosion. And, you know, I put my hands up to my face because I felt the stinging, and I threw myself down on the ground because I thought they must be shelling us. I looked up, and my companion had lost a leg. She had stepped on a landmine.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The army came down, and they got us out of there. And I had a boyfriend by this time.
So wait a minute.
What's a good?
Who was
So
a
what is
Sabra.
your conclusion?
No. Let me tell you the rest of the story. My boyfriend, who was a Sabra, he came running up to me and he said, "Thank God it wasn't you." He said, "I worried all morning that it would be you." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, we knew there was a landmine down there." And I said, "And you sent the American volunteers?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "Nobody from the kibbutz would go down to work because we knew there was a landmine." They had caught 3.
But what is the point?
The
Yeah,
point,
what
the
are you
point
running
is
now?
that they sent me down there knowing there was,
No.
yes. And the next
What do
day,
you want you to
Oh,
do?
what?
the next day they were all celebrating because there had been a fundraiser in New York and they had raised a lot of funds because an American girl had stepped on a landmine.
Okay.
Look, they knew there was a landmine there. They sent us down there. And, you know,
Nita, let me.
I lived
I mean,
this.
I have to
You know,
respond.
he's
It doesn't
lived
make-
a lot too.
Doesn't
I
make
mean,
sense.
No, I
mean,
lived this-
Those
this
kibbutz. I
particular-
know. I mean, you went to a trauma, which I don't want
Yeah.
even to take myself and put it under any. I cannot compare it to your experience. But this happening of going every night and infiltrate into the kibbutzim and trying to kill innocent people. They didn't know that you are the American there. They didn't
no,
care
it
who
was the
they are going.
Israelis who sent me down there to step on the landmine.
They didn't care who is going to be killed.
But the Israelis didn't
No,
either.
he's talking about the people from the other side. Yeah.
They didn't. Those who put the mine didn't care. They knew it's going to be innocent people. Why?
It's not innocent people if they kill Israelis.
Come on.
No.
A
If you-
villager in the
if you live,
kibbutz?
if you live in a country, I'm not an.
Okay.
No, if
I
an Iraqi,
mean,
if an Iraqi comes
Carlos,
here,
I cannot take
if
it.
an Iraqi comes here and kills
it's-
Americans, he's not killing innocent people because we supposedly have a democracy
no.
and we elect our government. So we bear
Well-
responsibility for our government in a way that a
Nita,
dictatorship
this is
does
beyond any human scope of agreement. That people can be killed, innocent people.
But
That's
what
it.
about the Israelis
That's a
sending
large
Americans
question.
down there?
That's a
Innocent
large
people?
question. Killing of innocent
They're not
terrorism.
innocent people if they
It-
support the government that
How
is
can we deal
oppressing
with,
them.
Yeah, but how can we deal with this? We come to a time where we were talking last night. We
Now,
talked
let
late
me
into
only
the night.
make the picture
Sure,
more,
by all
more-
means
more
do.
obvious.
Yeah.
So this mine, which you were involved with, and I don't know why they didn't tell you about it,
Yeah,
that
who
it
knows?
is going to happen. I had
Because
no
we
idea.
wouldn't go. That's
Come
why.
on. So there were days where people didn't go at all to into the fields because of such situations. I don't know what happened over there. I can't tell you the information.
But
I
put
don't
it
know.
in a broader context. Yeah.
Those villages were every night going through the fear that being attacked, which is happening nowadays in the settlement.
Right. That happens, yeah.
And those retaliation Air Force went back to take out positions in which the Fedayeen were for sure hiding.
It was a village. It was a village
the
with
distance
families.
you say village.
It was a village.
How would you know if it's not in a specific building, like they do it now, the targeting?
Once a week they hit the same building?
How do you know it's the same building? From the distance you would know if it's the same building.
It wasn't a building, it was a lot larger than that.
But it's hard when you get down to a specific...
Let me come back to the story, which I think should be brought on.
Put it in a broader moral context.
In a moral context.
Yeah. Yeah.
This year, or was it last year? I don't remember when it was. The Jenin so-called massacre. The whole world came upon that around 500 to 600 to 1,000 Palestinians were killed in the refugee camp in Jenin. Even the UN personal, how do you call it, ambassador of Kofi Annan, a Norwegian by the name of Larsen.
Yeah, that's right, I remember.
Smelled the stink of the bodies, which later on was obvious were of dead cows. So to judge from one's own experience without looking into the details.
Yeah, right.
And thereafter there came a whole investigation which we didn't want it to happen, but it finally took place.
It never took place.
It took place by, not by the UN, because we don't trust the UN.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
We have a very good reason not to trust the UN.
Okay.
You know, we are the only country in the UN which will never be in the Security Council.
Is that right? How can that be?
Oh, you don't know that?
Why is that? I didn't know that. Why?
Because
why? Because
nobody wants us.
Nobody wants you. You're all there. You must be doing something.
Count Bernadotte back in the 40s, who was
what has
who
this
was
to
the
do? So many
representative
people
of
were
the UN.
assassinated. So what has this to do?
He was assassinated by your people.
So what?
So what do you mean? So what?
Well,
that's a result.
It's okay when you do it. It's not okay
that's
when
a result
other
not
people
to
do
be
it.
at the UN. Syria is now heading. It was heading for this year. The Security Council. Isn't it a joke?
Yeah.
Which you proclaim, Americans proclaim.
But
let me finish.
Yes, by all means, Doug.
So
yeah,
Jenin was brought forward as a massacre, and then then it came out that 23 Israeli soldiers were killed over that battle area.
Partly because they were using humanitarian...
Because they used human shields, and the 23 paratroopers went in one by one and were killed by snipers from that building which they tried to evacuate.
Yeah, yeah.
They were defending their own buildings.
Yeah, but they were taking out, they tried to take out armed people, that's all.
Listen, I was used as a human shield by Israelis.
Okay.
And I was a civilian, I was unarmed.
You were not used by Israelis.
Yes, I was. When I was sent down to work in that field with 7 other girls, we were used as human shields.
I think this is out of context and I cannot...
It's hard to deal with. And the one thing we know is that there's a great deal of trying to use idiosyncratic, stories and so forth to try and make them larger. The larger issues are there, and you brought it up, if I may. The larger issue of this question of terrorism. We're fighting a war on terrorism now. We had an attack in this country, and there is that question. And how can we differentiate? We were talking about it last night. How do we differentiate between the terrorism or the, let's say, violence that's directed against innocent civilians by the powerful, as opposed to what the weak are doing against them? I know that Hitler did call the resistance fighters in Yugoslavia fighting against the Nazi occupation terrorists. I know Nelson Mandela was called a terrorist. And I don't, and where...
Begin was called a terrorist.
Begin was called a terrorist and this sort of thing. But then George Washington was called a terrorist by George III. It's a term that is used. But, the thing is that the powerful, and where does legitimacy lie? And, international legitimacy, and how do we establish one group as being somehow representative of what, the march of history, or the inevitable march of history, or inevitable facts on the ground, or is it still just power, geopolitical strength and power that rules? And back again to that question of, is the United States of America had, or have they had, or how do we answer historically for the fact that we did kill between up to maybe 5 million people in South Vietnam with napalm, ruthlessly do that. A great power. We've never paid anything for that. We're never called that. Or we dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Dresden, these kind of things. So the powerful are never in the dock. They always represent the legitimate. And how do we deal with the disequilibrium of power in the world? And what is the long-term effect of that? Or is it an issue that should be brought up in terms of trying to understand what's going on, particularly in a world where the New York Times again says there may be a challenge to the power that's being because they do not have a vision adequately to serve the needs of all the people of the world, and yet they're asserting themselves with great power and calling themselves legitimate. And again, it's back to the United States, and whether or not that position might be being challenged by the tides of history in a serious way.
Oh, for sure.
You think it is?
Oh, should
the United States is being challenged in its leadership?
Should be
seriously.
Should be judged.
To the point where it
but
could be...
you have to wait and see.
Wait and see.
You have to have a perspective, historical background to see what is going to happen. If, for instance, which I hope, Iraq will turn, and this is a very big if, but let's take it as a possibility.
Okay.
Will turn to be a modern country which could have had the potential already with Saddam Hussein to become.
It was modern, she said.
Yeah, but it lost. I mean, when you go now and see the infrastructure.
And she's saying it's because it was modern that it was attacked.
No.
Because it was effectively able to muster some power.
The last years, you have people who come from there and tell you what happens. The infrastructure was not reconstructed. I mean, for many years, a lot of money didn't go there.
No, because of the sanctions.
It was the sanctions of the UN?
No, why were the sanctions? It didn't allow the inspectors. Why didn't they allow the inspectors?
No, the sanctions were with the inspectors, meaning there were sanctions.
Yeah, because the inspector had to prove that there is no weapons of mass destruction. And why did they not allow them to show it?
But there were none, apparently. How can you find something that wasn't there?
It's like who comes first? The sanction came after.
Came after the first war.
After the first war.
Yeah. The first war was not because of weapons of mass destruction.
Until a very simple situation could have arisen in which what they should have come up was a report by the inspector saying there is none. What was the problem? If he has none, why should he not allow them to prove it's none? He didn't.
Well, that's a question everyone wonder why.
No, we don't know because he was hiding them.
Apparently they aren't there. They're not there now. They can't find them. Mr. K reported yesterday.
Listen,
and it begins to
I
look.
mean, again,
I
don't want to make
Bush wants another
If they had been there, he would have
$100
used them. Come on.
No, not necessarily.
Of course he would have. The reason you have weapons of mass destruction is as a deterrent.
They are not ready to
Why would they not have used them?
Wait a moment. You are missing a link.
Yeah.
You may have the weapons produced as such, I mean the substances, let's call it, of the weapon, the chemical or biological one. But in order to weaponize them, you need to have the second step, the delivery. And with delivery, there's a lot of problems. Even nowadays, I mean, I don't want to make something which was not a secret. The Second World War, the Germans, the British, Americans, the Japanese, everybody tried to create this type of weapons.
That's like saying
let me
you have
only finish.
gunpowder, but you don't have any guns. I mean,
No. You have the chemicals. If you work on the chemicals, how would you guarantee that one day you won't have the guns? So, I mean, if you have no intention to do it, why do you have to prepare it?
To defend yourself.
Defend with biological weapons?
Israel has biological weapons and chemical weapons and nuclear weapons.
So?
And you claim that it's to defend yourselves.
That's right.
And that is
who is going to attack Iraq?
Yeah. That.
Who?
Israel attacked. They destroyed the nuclear reactor.
Only the nuclear reactor.
Yeah.
We didn't have any intention.
But
let me finish.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
So the point is that once you have this type of threat, if you would have been smart enough, you would have allowed them to finish up, and everything would have been okay. But for some reason, I don't know if it was playing a bluff. Nobody knows yet. For his neighborhood countries to threaten them, as a possibility.
I think the sanctions clearly. The sanctions were devised to humiliate
He has
Iraq
proven that he made use of.
Had nothing to do with finding.
He has proven that he made use of it, of chemical weapons against the Kurds. I mean, that's a fact. So once you have made use of it in a very crude way,
not a fact.
It's not a fact.
No, it isn't. After the war, after the 91 war, I guess it was the Imperial College in England, sent a team of people
And
over
what
there.
happened? You can still see today those people who were...
No, they came to the conclusion...
You talk about Halabja?
Well, Halabja, the conclusion of the Pentagon at the time was that it was Iranian weapons and that the people in the
Iranians
village
don't have it.
were caught. Yes, they did. Iran and Iraq were both using it against each other during the Iran-Iraq war. On
But
the
not
border.
against civilians.
But Halabja was a village on the border, and what was claimed by the Pentagon was that they got caught in the crossfire. Okay.
But the villagers themselves say it was Iraqi.
No, the villagers themselves don't say that. I know a relative...
They were afraid nowadays.
I know a relative of the mayor of Halabja at that time, and they say that the planes came from the Iranian side, and that proof was that the villagers ran in the opposite direction.
When
and
you
Dennis
interviewed
Halliday,
today...
Dennis Halliday, who was the head of the Oil for Food program and who resigned because he said it was a program of genocide against the Iraqis for the UN, he went to Halabja in '88, and he told me in '98, and he said there wasn't one single person there today who was from Halabja, and he went with somebody who had lived in Halabja before, who was from there. He said it was resettled by completely new people. There is nobody there who lived there before.
But they were interviewed even now, those people.
Well, who are
with
they?
the remains of their scars.
But we don't know that they don't know that it was Iran.
How do we determine this, if we could?
No, wait.
But anyway, the Imperial College...
So just to try to bring it into...
In their report, they said they found no evidence that they took a lot of soil samples. They found no evidence that Saddam had used chemical weapons, and the conclusion was if he used them, he used very little.
So,
well, now what's it?
But there was no conclusion that he used
So if
them.
he used very little, I mean, this is against...
A lot of this gets to be...
Because they could find nothing in the soil.
But if you yourself said if he used very
No,
little.
the Imperial College said, their conclusion was that either he didn't use them or he used very little.
So it's not cleared.
Yeah,
well, you can't prove a negative.
These things, if I may, the way we're talking, it gets to be a lot of he said, she said, this, and it gets a little bit hard on that level, particularly in a realm where there's so much propaganda on all sides.
Right.
Everyone has propaganda, spin machines going at 1,000 miles an hour everywhere, all over the place. And I'm wondering if we couldn't get, and there's big interest. And
So coming back, I mean,
the thing I'm interested in, if I could, is at a moral level or an ethical level.
Let's go back to that.
Ethic is really important. And we've got this world now, and we were talking, you and I and your wife, we had a great talk last night about the fact that there's something really going on when you get to a situation where we have weapons of destruction now that are able to destroy our whole species.
Right.
So we've got a real question now. What is our collective judgment on why it is that there can be some people who are able to have weapons of mass destruction and other people that are not able to have weapons of mass destruction? And what is the basis upon which we determine that, other than just pure, as she said, defense, pure geopolitical power of the strong being able to override the interests of the weak and so forth? How do we determine that the United States it's a fact on the ground as it is, that they're able to have these weapons, but other people cannot even think about developing atomic energy generating plants and so forth, because somehow they're where do we make that divide on a world scale, do you think? People that can, or even if you were to carry it further, if you take dual use, you could take fertilizer or anything like that, could potentially be developed into something that could possibly be a weapon that could be used against somebody or something. So therefore, these people are doomed never to be able to industrially or modernize or develop ever, because if they do, they might possibly become a threat to the powerful. And how do we deal with that dilemma in the world where we've got to allow the 5 billion people who are not being served by the system now and is possibly being challenged by world public opinion as legitimate, the basic legitimate structure of world government and the power structure that exists? And what are some of the realities around that? And do you think with the plummeting favorable idea toward the United States around the world, again, not just in the Middle East, but Africa, South America, the population of the world against those institutions, where do all these major questions come, and how do we determine moral or ethical legitimacy among the various peoples and power structures of the world now?
Well, you're right. I mean, you bring up this the most important question which exists.
Yes.
How do we
How
control?
do we
Control it ourselves?
Right.
Of self-destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea would be to decrease the amount of greediness and the amount of fighting for power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because with modern technology, you could have actually, in my opinion, resolved the issue of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if there are no people who are poor, there is no hatred. If there is no hatred, there is no war. If there is no war, there is no need for defense.
Okay, and the leading power...
Look for what
Yeah.
Naomi brought up yesterday in the talk about the Indians in Alaska,
Yeah.
which don't have in their pictures or setup weapons,
Mm-hmm.
because in their history they didn't have to fight for anything. They had plenty of abundance of everything.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I think the world is in a situation where it could have, and it should do that. The sooner the better. Try to avoid poverty. Now this...
But we also agreed that the course we're on now is going in the opposite
Right.
direction. And
So
that they are only, the strong are, as traditionally they have, only asserted their power to
to
get
be
more for
greedy.
themselves
Right.
and to be exploitative of the people of the world. And that includes our major institutions. I mean, International
I agree
Monetary
with you.
Fund, you know, the United States is a hyperpower, Israel is a developed country, Europe, and they do not have a model. Is the model that's being presented as somehow legitimate going to be questioned by a, be questioned by, as I said before, a massive uprising against the arrogance of those who are developed and the lack of a vision of what is required, so that there will be a major challenge to the hegemony that the developed peoples and the wealthy of the world, the plutocrats of the world, are calling legitimate, and they're not really legitimate. They're like an emperor without any clothes.
Right.
Do you think this is likely to come out in terms of the evolution of understanding and consciousness among the peoples of the world? And we may be in for a rude awakening where the United States is so certain that they have an answer for everything and that they have the power and they can exert it wherever they want to and so forth, that they're going to come a cropper, as we say in the English language, and there's going to be a serious challenge to that?
I hope for the child to come up and say, hey, the king is naked.
You do feel that?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Well, then, would that include then the asymmetry of power that exists between, let's just say in the case, bring it back to Israel now, between the Israelis, which is a regional superpower, and the Palestinians?
Well,
or how do we deal with the asymmetry of power in situations where one people have all the power and the other people must do what they are told and are treated not able to exert power? And what do the powerless of the world do in the face of the arrogance of those that have the power?
Well, I don't want...
mainly the United States. Mainly the United States.
I don't agree with your comparison
Okay.
vis-à-vis Israel and the Palestinians.
Okay.
Because if we go back a little bit, like 50 years of history of Israel, there were 3 occasions in which the conflict could have been resolved. In 1948, when we had the Ben-Gurion who decided to accept the UN partition plan, although he had opposition inside Israel, and he actually was almost on the brink of civil war. I don't know if you're aware of that. That Altalena ship was a trigger point. And secondly, after 1967, there was no then settlements in the West Bank. There was no settlements in the Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip was ruled by the Egyptians. The West Bank was ruled by Jordan. If they want to give the Palestinian independence, they could have given it then back to them. But they didn't want to. Why? Because they wanted to destroy Israel anyway.
They wanted to destroy Israel. Right?
I mean, there is...
Do you think that's the main... And that question, from the Israeli perspective, that's the main problem, because they won't accept...
It's still until nowadays. Wait.
Yeah,
let me finish.
yeah, right.
The last chance was... I wouldn't say there will not be another window of opportunity, but the latest, not the last, the latest one was Barack with Clinton, with Arafat in Camp David. The most generous plan was brought forward and he walked away.
Okay, that's what we hear. The other
And
people
unless they will
details.
have a new leadership which is really able, not only proclaiming, but able to come up with a compromise. Now, for instance, the right of return. Everybody is talking about the right of return. If the right of return exists, why should be the settlement dismantled? I mean, people are living there already 20 years, so let them live there. They claim this is Palestinian land.
Wow.
I just don't want to argue about it, but let's assume that this is their point. If so, why should Arab refugees come back to Israel? They should go back to the Palestinian state, which will be erected, and settle down there. I mean, we know there is a problem maybe of compensation, but this could have been dealt right away by saying people who are refugees should have compensation for what they have lost, but not the right of return.
All right.
Now, the right of return, by definition, is going to tilt the balance of the population of Israel, which is the majority of it is Jewish, into a binational situation.
Yeah, right.
And as a result, if we keep a democracy, there is no Jewish state.
Yeah, you got your horns of a
So there is no way for Israel to accept the idea of return. For sure, we are ready to be part of the agreement for compensation.
I understand. That I understand. Where they're putting the gate, the wall is going up now, where they'll go around the area.
There's no wall.
Well, there isn't. They're not building a wall. What is that that's in the paper?
There's a fence.
A fence.
You see, the fence is done in the similar way that the Gaza Strip is circumvented with a fence.
Yeah.
And no suicide bombers ever came out from the Gaza Strip. Now they're going to put a similar fence, like we have a similar fence on the Lebanese border. Why don't you question why we put up a Lebanese on the Lebanese border?
Yeah, and
we don't have such a fence vis-a-vis Jordan.
Yeah.
Because
why did the United States object to it? I wonder.
I'll tell you
Some
why.
people in the United States, and the question of Ariel, whether it's going to go out to include Ariel. It's intruding on the land that would have been in the 67
you see,
Palestinian
my
side.
feeling is that Arafat went to Oslo, or agreed to go to Oslo through his people, was that he realized then that as long as the more he will wait, there will be less for him to get back as land. Because the settlers, the settlers started to become an issue not right away after 67. The first Jewish settlement in the West Bank or in the Gaza Strip came there after the Yom Kippur War.
We only got a couple minutes left.
You know why?
Why?
Because we were waiting for the negotiation to take place.
Okay.
No, in 1968, when I visited Hebron, there was a settlement there already.
Well, in Hebron was a Jewish community before, which you
No, but
might
this was a
remember.
settlement. This was a
In
settlement.
29, they were massacred.
But this was a
So
settlement.
they
of
went back
people
to
who
the
had gone.
Jewish. They went back to what is called Hadassah building, which was a Jewish building, which you had the Kushan, if you wish, to prove that it belonged to the Jews. And they went there. I don't want to go into
I know
details.
the details again. It gets in the detail, but there's this thing. But I mean, we go into that. But you don't take.
I believe.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I have
you
to go
don't.
To the end point.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure. We only got 2 minutes left. Yeah.
Peace is possible.
You think peace?
Oh,
is
peace
now
is-
wait a minute. You're speaking peace. You're talking Middle East. You talk the region. You think the world.
Well, I'm speaking
What
about
do you
the
think?
world as such, but basically I'm
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the peace in the Middle East.
In Israel.
In Israel.
All right. Yeah. All right.
It's possible. One has to accept, first of all, Israel's existence. Egypt did, Jordan did. Maybe Saudi Arabia is now accepting it, not directly, but indirectly. The second point is one has to realize, and Israel is willing now, even Sharon said it already. Sharon the guy who said it's never going to happen, that a Palestinian state is a possibility at the end of the process. But a compromise has to become available between the leadership of both sides, and especially the declaration. I mean, this is all what Israel demands, that by coming to the end solution, whatever it's going to be, this is the end of the conflict. If such a declaration is not coming up, There's no way to accept.
Do you see it? Do you see an analogy? I'm sorry.
No, only to bring it as a possibility, and that's the end of it. It's Haifa. Haifa is a city of brotherly love. I live there. It exists of the percentage of about 20-25% non-Jews, including Muslims, including Christians, including Druze, and they live in harmony, in dignity, in coexistence. I myself, as a director of a hospital in Haifa, has promoted many Arab physicians, and was the first one in Israel to become heads of departments of cardiology or other specialties. Not because they were Arabs, but because they were good physicians.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. We've run out of time.
I can't.
Well, you've only got 30 seconds, literally. You got something to say? Quick?
Well, I wanted to lead up to this, but I think that Israel is going to cease to exist unless it agrees to become a binational state. And the reason I say that this is because Arab sentiment after the Jenin massacre and everything that went on at that time, and obviously we don't agree about the facts, which is why words are not going to solve anything, but I know that the younger generation of Arabs now, unlike the generation that is my age, who did not want to destroy Israel, they wanted an accommodation.
We must wind it up.
The younger generation who see this on television and so on, who are watching the news, want to destroy Israel, and that's the 9 and 10 and 12-year-olds. And I know that in Jordan, people have to lock their children in their homes. These are not Palestinians. They have to lock them in their rooms at night because the children want to get out and go kill Israelis.
And if the thing in Iraq doesn't work and the United States is a bulwark against that kind of thing, that sentiment around the world is likely to challenge not only Israel, but it would challenge the United States, which is an even bigger seeming impossibility. But we cannot talk about it on this program because we're out of time.
Sorry, a year from now.
A year from now or sooner. Yeah, your place. Good to see you, Dov. Sorry we run right out of time, and I thank you very much. I'm immediate right, Nita Renfrew, author again of Saddam Hussein, interesting book, available on the internet. And on my immediate left is Theo Dov Golan. And a pleasure to present those perceptions to you. We invite you to tune in. We'll come back again next week. Glad we could get this in. Just scratch the surface of a very big subject. We'll be coming back again next week. Thanks very much for viewing, and we'll see you next week. And thanks for coming in. So I'm sorry, we've run out of time.
In 6 to 8 months, 9 months, we'll be able to judge.
I wonder whether or not my big question is whether or not it's possible that the reaction to the arrogance of the United States, that's my country I look at mostly, and I see Israel as a close ally of that, tied into that, the effect of Israel, is that there could be, and it seems impossible because we're such a superpower, and it's just assumed that, but that we're so out of touch with things that are needed, and we don't have a way of getting leadership that's worthy, that there's going to be a massive rising around the world against the arrogance of the United States, because I think a number of people don't see the United States as something to be contained. The United States sees itself as a great light onto the world, but the world doesn't see it that way increasingly, it seems to me. And that's the question I was getting at, whether it could actually be a challenge to the leadership that the United States is attempting to put. And it begins to look from various places that could happen. And that would have repercussions in Israel if that were to happen.
Yeah, but that's a different question. I mean, in the old days, capitalism, this was Marx and Engels.
Yeah, they don't have, the contradictions of Marx and Engels, the contradictions in capitalism are still there, and they're not meeting. They don't